See, for me, Proxmox is one of the best pieces of software there's out there if you are a Homelab enthusiast. I absolutely love Proxmox, and every time I want to set up a brand new server, I always end up going back to Proxmox. I've tried Hyper-V, I've tried VMware, I've tried all the other bits of pieces and software that are out there, and as I said, I always tend to go back to Proxmox. So if you are somebody who's just starting with Proxmox, I want to show you kind of some beginner-friendly things that you have to do, and I'm going to say you have to do because it just makes your life so much easier when it comes to Proxmox. And the very first one, in my opinion, is an absolute must. And I know I said the other ones are a must, but I also think that this one will just make your life that much easier just because it will just speed up your workflow when it comes to creating VMs and just managing Proxmox overall. Because don't get me wrong, Proxmox is brilliant, but when you're first getting started with Proxmox, it can be a little bit overwhelming and can be a little bit daunting when you are trying to get the grips with it all and how it all works and how to use it. But anyway, I've waffled on enough. Let's jump over to Proxmox. Let me show you the first thing that you have to do, because in my opinion, as I said, it's an absolute must. And you might be wondering, Bobby, why have you got the terminal open when you're about to show me Proxmox? And I completely get that. But the first thing we need to do is we need to set up SSH on Proxmox. And we're going to do this by creating an SSH key on our main machine and then copying that SSH key, the public key, across to our Proxmox machine, just to make remoting in and signing in on our Proxmox server that much easier. And I've configured my own terminal here in macOS. It's the actual just terminal application here. And I'm also using the Fish terminal, and I'm also running Starship. If you want to see a video on that, by all means, let me know. But yeah, it just looks pretty, doesn't it? So in order to generate an SSH key, we need to type in the following command here. And it's going to be, and I'm just going to copy and paste it from my arsenal here. It's going to be this: ssh-keygen-t ed25519-c, and then followed by your email address. That's how I generally generate my SSH keys. This is from GitHub. I've taken the documentation from GitHub because they are quite good when it comes to this stuff. Now here it's asking me, where do I want to save this file? I'm just going to say in the default location is absolutely fine. I'm going to hit enter. Now for me, it says the SSH key already exists, but I'm not really using it anywhere. So I'm just going to hit yes. And here it's going to ask me if I want to protect it with a passphrase. Now you can set up a password, obviously, for this. Now I'm just going to leave it as empty like so, because I will be deleting this at the end of the video. And then here it says the fingerprint is such and such. Now the next thing we need to do is, now that we've got the SSH key configured, is we want to now copy the public key across to our Proxmox virtual environment, or our Proxmox server that we've just set up. And you're going to be running this command here, which is ssh-copy-id -i, and then you're going to select where the SSH key is. Now, if you've left it in the default location, you are fine to use this location here, which is the home directory .ssh and then id_ed25519.pub. And the pub is the important bit because that's the public key. And then you are going to have to look into what your IP address of your Proxmox container is. But I'm guessing because you got this far already, you will know your IP address. And here is where you do a root. So that's obviously the username for your Proxmox if you haven't set up a new user, and then @ and then the IP address. Now in my case, it's 10.0.40.10, and I'm going to show you this here on my Proxmox VE. And here we go. We've got the IP address of 10.0.40.10. This is how you can find it out. If you don't know what you're doing, you click on PV, you click on shell, and then type in IPA like so, and then you see the IP address configured. Now, again, you would have most likely configured this when you were setting up your Proxmox device during the installation. And if you're doing this for the first time, it will ask you for your password for your Proxmox VE environment, basically. And there we go. So the key has now been added across. And now I need to sign in as follows. And this is only for the very first time. And I'm going to type in ssh-i and so on, but it already gives you this command. So I'm just going to copy and paste it. And I have now successfully SSH'd into my Proxmox environment. And if I show you this, if I type in IPA, we can see here 10.0.40.10. And we're doing this all from our terminal here. Now I'm using Mac, but the same case works if you're using Windows. You obviously just need to remember where you store your files. And one of the beauties of this is that you can set a super secure password when you're setting up your Proxmox container for your root user to add an extra layer of security. So I've now logged out of Proxmox and I'm back kind of in my main terminal. And in order to SSH in, you literally type in SSH root, I can spell, at 10.0.40.10 because it already knows the host where we're coming from, and then you hit enter, and there we go. It's as simple as that. We are now in our Proxmox virtual environment. Now that we've done the basics, the next thing we want to do is we want to set up something called ProxMenu-X. In my opinion, it's the best script that you can use when it comes to Proxmox, especially if you're a beginner, because it's got so many amazing features. And this menu, this Prox Menu X, is going to be part of this video quite a lot because it's just super, super simple to use, but it offers some absolutely incredible features. So this is that GitHub here, and you will find this down in the description below the video. And also there's a like button and a subscribe button if you're enjoying this type of content. But it's called Prox Menu X. And I always recommend, please be careful when you're pasting stuff from the internet, have a little read through and so on. And it even says it here on the Prox Menu X website. So be careful when copying scripts from the internet. Always remember to check your sources. But essentially all we need, if really, is where it says installation here. We can copy this command. We're going to go back to our new SSH interface here, and then I'm going to paste it and I'm going to hit enter. And that's basically it. We're going to get presented with this menu here. We're just going to hit enter, and there we go. It's just finished. It's that simple. I didn't even have to cut it. And here it tells us to run Prox Menu X, simply execute this command in the console or terminal, and it's just menu. So I'm going to clear the screen. I'm going to type in menu, and that takes us into Proxmox here. And here is where we have all the goodies and all the features. But what I want to do is I want to go back to Proxmox, and I'm just going to sign back in. And one of the first things we get presented with when we are starting out with Proxmox is this no valid subscription thing. It is honestly the biggest pain ever. Honestly, it is. It's just absolutely annoying. You have to click OK every single time, and then you have to go into repositories and then delete the ones you don't want and all this sort of stuff. And this is where Prox Menu X comes in. So if I switch back to my terminal here, here is some of the super cool things that you can do with it. And it's the very first option. It says settings, post-install Proxmox. I'm going to go into this. And here is where we can customize the script right at the very top, or we can just run the automated version. I'm just going to use the customizable one. And here's where we can select all the different options that we want. One of the ones I tend to enable is a VFIO IOMMU. So if you're looking to do GPU pass-through, this is something we definitely need. I'm also going to optimize memory here. I'm going to optimize all the other bits here. I'm going to update and upgrade the system because we just want to be on the latest version. One critical thing is synchronize time automatically. I don't want to download any languages, and I'm going to install common utilities here. I'm going to install the relevant guest agent as well because that's quite handy. I'm going to remove the subscription banner, option 28. Hallelujah. This is where you get rid of that subscription banner, that really, really annoying one here. And then you can go ahead and do all the other bits. Now I'm going to install and configure fast fetch because I'm fancy like that, but you don't have to do that. And then I really don't need to be doing any more, and I'm going to click OK. Now here it's asking me to select utilities. I'm just going to install HTOP because I do use it. That's just for management of software and so on. Intel GPU tools, and that's pretty much it. I'm going to hit OK, and it's going to go ahead and download everything. Now, I don't know how long that's going to take, probably a couple of minutes or so. Just let it do its thing and let it install and let it kind of configure Proxmox the way you want it. And we are back. This is taking about 5 minutes, so it's taking a bit longer because I've added a few bits and pieces that I wanted. And here we are back in the home screen. Now we're going to touch onto this shortly, but there's a couple more things that I want to do. So I've just had to reboot after the installation and the updates and so on. It took about 5 or so minutes, and we're back in here, and we do not get the annoying banner. I'm super happy with that. Everything's now working as it should. But I've gone ahead and SSH back into our Proxmox because there's one more thing we need to do. Now this is optional, but I absolutely love doing it. And if you've watched any of my videos, you know I'm a huge fan of Tailscale. And I like to just add it because it just brings everything together, and it allows me to SSH in if I kind of need to start up any machines, any VMs or anything like that. And I just get a bit of an extra layer of security with that. So if we take a look at my Tailscale account here, I can click on add device. I can then click on client device, and here under copy link on Linux is where the install command is. So it's cal-fssl https tailscale.com install.sh and so on. And this is why I like SSHing into machines, because I can just SSH back into my Proxmox, and there we go, and run it. Shouldn't take too long, should have taken about a couple of minutes to install. So Tailscale's just finished installing, and in order to get Tailscale set up completely, I need to run Tailscale up, but I can also tag on a couple of flags, and these things here with the dashes are called flags. Now here I'm going to run --accept routes, and also --advertise routes, and then I can put my own personal devices kind of on the Tailscale. So another machine somewhere else can access, for example, my router at 10.0.40.1 if it needs to be, by me advertising the routes. And you can see that here on 10.0.40.0/24, and I'm telling it kind of how big my subnet is and so on. I'm going to wait for it to do whatever it needs to do. And here is the link that I need in order to log in. So I can then copy and paste this link into my web browser. I'm going to sign in. I'm going to click connect, and here it's asking me to approved the device. And here is where I've got security things set up because I have it, so I have to approve every machine and I have to approve every user, again, as a bit of a layer of security. Now, one more thing I need to do is under machine settings, I can do edit root settings, and I'm going to tick this box here, which says subnet routes. And here's where I'm advertising everything on 10.0.40.0.24. And there we go. If I go back to my machines, my Proxmox server should be in here somewhere now, and there it is, and it's also advertising my subnet. So the next thing we're going to do is we can now go crazy using ProxMenu. And as I said, I want to show you how powerful it is because it is absolutely amazing. You know what? You'll be pleased to know that we've pretty much done the hardest part there was of this whole setup. It is pretty much plain sailing from here. And now we're going to go ahead and set up our very own NAS. There are many choices that we could make, which is, for example, we could use TrueNAS, we could use Unraid, because we can run all of these pieces of software virtually. But there's one more that I want to show you. And honestly, it's super, I'm going to use the word idiot proof because I've managed to do it, but it is super simple, super great to set up, and the user interface is absolutely brilliant. And you most likely would have heard of it if you've used a piece of NAS software and you've kind of been dabbling in Homelab, and that is Synology. Now, it's a bit of a gray area, shall we say, running it the way we do. So we want to be back in our ProxMenu X here. And if you don't know how to do that, you just type in menu and press enter. But now we want to go into number 3, which is create VM from template or script. And we're going to be using this quite a lot if you are dabbling in kind of ProxMenu X. And here, the very first option is create VM from NAS, or create a NAS VM. So we're going to enter that. And here, the very top choice is Synology DSM. So we're going to hit that as well. I'm just going to give it a second, and it will now say, do you want to create the Synology VM? We're going to go yes. Then it's going to ask us for default settings. We do not want to use default settings only because it's better for us to configure it because we have a lot more control over it. So we're going to do that. Now it's asking me for a virtual machine ID. I really don't, it doesn't matter to me. So I'm just going to set it to 888 because why not? Now here we're going to choose the Q35 menu. That's fine. And then the BIOS type OVFM is fine. Now here's what you want it to be called. I'm going to call it Synology DSM NAS because why not? Here under CPU model, we're going to select host. Now under CPU cores, your NAS really doesn't need a lot of cores. It generally prefers a lot more RAM. So I'm going to give it a bit more RAM. Whereas for now, 2 cores is absolutely fine because it does very little processing or transcribing. And here is where I'm going to give it 16 gig of RAM. Now, obviously, this depends on your configuration that you have at home. So if you've only got, say, 8 gig of RAM, obviously you won't need to be able, or won't be able to give it that much RAM. But I have 32 gig and I can allocate up to 16 gig of RAM to the VM here. Now, keep in mind, this is a case of up to, so it won't use the 16 gig the way like Windows would have an allocated amount of 16 gig. This will kind of use as much as it needs and it will go up to 16 gig. Now, in order to configure a network, we need to set a bridge network. And in this case, we're going to use VMBR0 and the MAC address we're going to leave as is. VLAN, we're not going to bother with that. None of this is something we're going to play around with. And we're just going to hit yes here. Now, the disk type here is where you want to configure how you want the disk to go through to the VM. And you have 2 choices. You can set up a virtual disk. So essentially it takes a chunk of your, say, 1 terabyte or 500 gig or whatever setup that you have in Proxmox, and you give it a chunk. So if you've only got 500 gig, I'll probably give it 100, 200 gig, something like that. Whereas if you've got physical disks like I have, separate that you want to allocate to this VM, this is also how you can do it. Now for me, I'm going to go through pass-through. So it's going to read all the disks, and here it says which ones do you want to give it. Now in my case, I have 2 1 terabyte SSDs that I'm going to pass through to Synology NAS because they'll be quick enough for my needs without kind of affecting and using the NVMe SSDs that I also have spare. Now, this bit here is kind of the bread and butter of this Synology NAS thing. And here we want to select the loader. Now, this is just effectively a way where it bypasses the checks and all the hardware requirements, and it kind of just loads Synology NAS. Now, I have the most experience with the ARC loader. I've played around with Tiny Core and I've played around with the Red Pill, but I'm just going to use the basic one, which is the Auxilium ARC loader here. And it will now go ahead and download everything off the internet. So give it a few minutes and let it do its thing, depending on your internet. And there we go. It's created it. It's taken about, what, a couple of minutes to create the VM. It's really not that long. And here it tells you what to do. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole process of how to set up the VM and how to set up Synology NAS. I've got a full dedicated video that I will link down below the like button if you're interested in finding out more. And while you're there, also don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy this type of content. But I'm going to hit enter here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to return to the main menu and I'm going to go out of this menu here. If I go back into Proxmox, if we take a look, my Synology NAS has been created here. If we click on hardware, we can see everything, all the configuration that we have. And in this case, as I said, I've passed through the 2 physical disks, but obviously if you haven't, yours would look slightly differently. And this is basically it. It's now configured. It's ready to go. I'm just going to start it up when I'm ready. And then once I've shot this video, I'm going to go ahead and configure it. And as I said, I've got the video link down below in the description if you're interested in finding out more. But we're now going to move on to something much cooler, in my opinion anyway, where you can kind of self-monitor your Proxmox instance. And I think it's super, super cool. And one of the things that I like to do when it comes to my Proxmox server is automate some of it and kind of just make my life a little bit easier. And I want to show you that in this section. Now, this is a bit more, I'm going to use the word advanced, but I just want to show you how everything ties together with SSH keys and so on. And there is a platform out there called N8N. I don't know if you've heard about it, but it's an automation platform and it's super easy to install. So let's jump over to the terminal. So if I type in menu and then we go down to Proxmox helper script, and then if you can search for it, you can type in N8N and there we go. There's an LXC container that you can run, which is called N8N, and it goes ahead and installs everything and configures everything for you. Now, I've already got it up and running here because this allows you to kind of automate a lot of your Proxmox stuff. And if you get really creative, and Network Chuck did an incredible video on it, you can actually have the N8N agent repair your container. So if any of the containers ever goes down, so for example, I've got a DNS server, it will automatically give it the right commands to try and start that container back up. And if not, it gives you a text message or a telegram or an email and so on. So it's kind of monitoring that you can do, but it just elevates it to another level. So I want to show you the real world use case that I've got. And I've already got my Telegram bot open here. So for example, if I say, tell me about my VMs and give me a status, something like that. So I'm going to hit enter. Now this takes a little bit of time, so let's give it a second and let's wait for it to kind of give me my result. But I'll show you the underlying thing that you can do. And the reason I wanted to show you this is because N8N is something that you can self-host. You can then connect it to a domain, as you can see on my end here, through something called Cloudflare tunnels, which we will do a separate video on because Cloudflare tunnels is super, super amazing to expose your services that you run on your home network to the internet. So you can then access it through a full-on domain name here. And then you can go ahead and set everything up here. But I want to show this, as I said, in a second. I'm just waiting for the status to come back to me. And then essentially what I get back is something like this, which says VM status update. And then it tells me VM name, Synology NAS, and so on. And the VM ID that's running, the status of it, the memory that it's using, the kind of the boot disk size, obviously the PID, which is just kind of an internal process. And it says all systems operational. So let me show you how I've got it configured and some of the things you could kind of go further with. Now, the first bit is the Telegram trigger. This is just me sending a message. But what you could do is you could also set up something called a schedule trigger. So it runs every 3 hours and it says, hey, check the status of the VMs and please give me an update, something like that. So every 3 to 6 hours, it just makes sure that everything's up and running and it sends you a status if that's something that you need, because this could be a production thing. Then we have an AI agent here. Now this bit here, this prompt, this says you're an expert with Proxmox, and then just format whatever the message the user sends. So, hey, what's the VM status is not something that a command line will understand. So this will just format it into a form that is easy for a command line to understand. And then the output would look something like this. It tells me that the command QM list, AWK, NI, and so on. Now, once that command's ready, it then feeds it into a node that SSHs into our Proxmox container. And then it runs the command that's been triggered here. And then it goes ahead and it creates an output. So it'll give me whatever's running kind of as an output here, which I can then take and feed it back into another AI agent. And I can say, please format the CLI output into an easy to read and understand message. So essentially this then translates back the SSH output into something that's kind of human readable. And I've kind of told it to add emojis and all this sort of stuff. And this is why the output looks the way it does, where you then get VM status with the rocket, and then you get the tick, and you get the save disk thing, and then you get the disk thing here and so on. And I've told it to do this, and then at the end, it just sends it back. And the reason I kind of wanted to finish with this is because, especially with Proxmox, if you're running a lot of, say, DNS services, which I'm running now, where I'm running 2 instances of Pi-hole, like like you can see here. So I've got a load of block lists here. I've got a load of clients connected. You can see they're all my real PCs connected here. And I've got this instance running and I've got 2. So if this goes down, that means the whole internet goes down. The way I've got my Pi-hole configured is that it also does ad blocking for my dad, who is actually VPN'd back to me, or we have a VPN connection, and he's running his internet essentially through my Pi-hole. So all of his queries also go through my Pi-hole, and then they block certain things because I just want to make sure that they're safe and protected as well. And I've got a load of block lists on here. So you can imagine if this goes down, this takes all of the internet down. This takes everyone's ability to go on the internet down, because obviously this is DNS. And we all know it's always DNS. So let me know what you think of this. Let me know if you want me to make any specific tutorials on anything I've just talked about, especially N8N, because I think N8N is super, super cool and how it integrates into your Homelab. But if you're interested in finding out more about the Pi-hole setup I've just talked about, check out this video here, because that walks you through everything, how to configure ad blocking, even when you're not on your home network.